Around the world tonight, condemnation after the secrecy of China's imprisonment of Muslim minorities was blown wide open.
Beijing's blueprint to round up, incarcerate, and indoctrinate at least 1 million Muslims, most of them ethnic Uyghurs. Tonight, we look at the reach of those ambitions. The scale is plain in the China cables. Secret government documents uncovered by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in partnership with the CBC and other news outlets. Mass arrests in China's Xinjiang province, prison camps, layers of surveillance and control with the goal of so-called ideological transformation. For the 2,000 members of the Uyghur minority living here in Canada, the details are chilling but not surprising. Many are feeling China's grip even here. He's far from China, but not beyond its reach. A young Uyghur too afraid to reveal his identity.
Because Chinese government can track you everywhere.
His is a story of pressure, and he shows us documents he was pushed to send to China. His Canadian address, copies of his ID, and something extraordinary.
And they even got my blood type and DNA.
So how'd this happen? Back home in China, his parents had been approached by police, curious about where he was. The implied threat? Get the information or they might end up in the detention camps. He tells us authorities already had seized his parents' passports so they can't leave China. For him to go back might mean detention. How will you see your parents again?
I can't see them in other countries.
Not just one man's worries, surveilling, separating families seems part of China's plan. The leaked documents outline how people are to be tracked or refused approval for visas. Some who've left the country arrested the moment they cross the border back. The bulletins note watching people with dual citizenship and point out 5 are Canadian.
Yes, she spoke to me before.
After 20 years in Canada, Uyghur activist Rukia Turdish is less afraid for herself, but worries deeply about the Uyghur students here who reach out to her for help. Her phone seems a lifeline for them.
Some of them, even the mothers and fathers, force them, okay, so the police bothering me so much, send a power of attorney, write down the letter with the lawyer, just you're not my son anymore, or you're not my daughter anymore.
Beyond the heartbreak of having to disown their parents, some are pressured to return to China, frightened their families will be punished if they don't. Some students just disappear from Canada. Hard to know how many have gone.
At least 6, 7 of them told me. The rest of them didn't tell me because they're so scared. You see the face?
Her burden is to listen and be haunted by things she cannot change. That's Canadian Mehmet Takti's trauma too, and it's personal. This is his mom back in Xinjiang. He last spoke with her in October of 2016 and says it felt like goodbye.
She told me, if we're not able to meet this world, probably hereafter, and do not think too much about us and continue to do what is right for you and take care of yourself.
His fight for justice has felt lonely, but now the proof is out. He wonders what the world will do.
This is the largest abuse of state power since Second World War. If we do not issue a condemnation on this, so what else we will issue this condemnation?
So how is the world reacting now that the documents make clear what's happening? Katie Nicholson looks at the response.
The human rights violations exposed here in Xinjiang can't be ignored, says Washington.
They say it's sovereign. It's in our country, therefore you shouldn't be meddling in our internal affairs. Yeah, but that argument doesn't work when human rights are involved and human lives are being impacted.
Global Affairs Canada says it, too, is deeply concerned. We continue to call on the Chinese government to ensure the human rights of its people, including freedom of religion, are fully respected. Official statements aren't concrete action.
I'm fighting for religious freedom.
But Anastasia Lin, a former Canadian beauty queen, once banned from China for her views on religious freedom, says those words can be powerful to those whose rights are being trampled.
When Western officials speak up, for them it's really that little bit of hope that helped them hanging there just a little bit longer. Because without the Western voice, these people have absolutely no weapon to defend themselves inside China.
A former Canadian ambassador to China thinks Ottawa can do more than issue a statement.
Another measure that we should consider taking is making sure that no Canadian equipment is sent to China that could be used for crowd control or used to limit freedom of speech.
It's a game changer.
The Uyghur Human Rights Project in Washington believes the abuses laid bare in the documents will prompt more than government action.
I expect a rash of company decisions to stop sourcing there and to stop operating there. I certainly expect that it will be very hard for UN bodies to avoid upholding the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which requires states to act on gross human rights violations.
For its part, China says this is an internal matter, and the stability, ethnic solidarity, and harmony in Xinjiang is the best response to such disinformation.
So, Katie, as you said, there are statements now, but I think a lot of people are wondering, what about action?
Okay, so not necessarily action, but a call to action. The UK Foreign Office now calling upon China to open its borders to UN monitors to come in to the camps and actually have unfettered access, see for themselves what's happening there. And Guy Saint-Jacques, the former Canadian ambassador to China, saying, yes, that is something Canada should also throw its weight behind.
Okay, we'll watch to see what happens. Katie Nicholson, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And in an entirely different case of detention in China, two Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, have been held there for nearly a year now. Global Affairs says the most recent consular visits for Kovrig and Spavor were last week, but there's been no apparent progress in getting them released. They were arrested in China just days after the RCMP arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou to face charges in the U.S. In May, the two Canadians were charged with spying offenses. And stay with us tonight as we launch our new special series on China's power. We will look at the man driving a quest for global dominance and how he's doing it. Sasha Petrusik examines the myth and the mission of Xi Jinping. That's coming up.
And then there's Hong Kong. The Chinese government may need to reconsider how it handles the region going forward after a record voter turnout with a near sweep for pro-democracy candidates. Greg Rasmussen is there.
We have 5 demands. Some of the winners in Sunday's vote went straight to the scene of one of the city's most heated battles. A university where some pro-democracy protesters, fearing arrest, remain barricaded inside.
We should show our unity to save our students, save our university campus.
After months of turmoil, most of Hong Kong has been calm since the election.
The pro-democracy Civic Party saw many of its candidates swept in as part of a wave energized by young voters.
Beijing should listen to Hong Kong people. We have spoken loud and clear.
Accountability for police misconduct and universal suffrage for higher levels of government are two key demands. He says despite months of rioting and unrest, the vote made it clear most citizens backed the protest movement rather than the pro-Beijing establishment.
They have all the resources. They have been here for so long. They have the machinery. They have the big data, and they still fail.
Before Sunday's vote, 70% of the seats were held by parties sympathetic to Beijing.
It shows a kind of very clear support for democracy by the Hong Kong people.
He says the city's higher level of government, the Legislative Council, tried to pretend it had the support of the silent majority.
And then they dismiss public opinion polls, they dismiss demonstrations, but this is a kind of a very unambiguous message sent to them by the voting population.
Hong Kong's Beijing-backed leader Carrie Lam says she would listen humbly and seriously reflect on these lower-level elections,
including deficiencies in governance, including unhappiness with the time taken to deal with the current unstable environment.
Some of the newly powerful pro-democracy parties responded with a fresh call for Lam's resignation. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Hong Kong.
Welcome back. After decades of American dominance, Beijing now rivals Washington for global leadership, with potential consequences for just about everyone. Tonight, we launch our special series on China's power, examining the threats and the opportunities ahead in what some already call China's century. Financially, militarily, technologically, its power grows by the day. And by extension, so does uncertainty about the existing world order. If Americans now question their country's role in the world, inside China, there's no such hand-wringing. It sees its rise as a simple return to a natural order, the world a great wheel with China at the center. 500 years of Western dominance, merely a passing chapter in history. Not everyone may see it that way.
We are the piggy bank to the world. We've been ripped off by China.
But what is clear is that China's force cannot be denied, and the world will just have to adjust. Over the next week, we will look at China's power in politics, trade, and culture. We begin tonight with Sasha Petrusic's look at the man driving its aggressive push forward.
They come by the busload. Hundreds of political pilgrims tracing the steps of Chinese President Xi Jinping daily into the rugged hills of northeast China. Dusty yellow soil where the seeds of his cult of personality now grow. Where party officials obediently line up to hear legends of how Xi once waded barefoot into freezing water to help the villagers clear ice dams. Xi was banished here as a teen 50 years ago from a family with a solid communist pedigree caught in the purges of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. Living in this cave, learning, as the slogan says, to struggle hard and be self-reliant. Today, the required political lectures continue around the village, as we're followed by police and kept from interviewing anyone. Such is the sensitivity to Xi's image. To believe in this flag is to believe in President Xi, says Liu Mingfu. He lectured political thought at China's military college. As soon as he came to power, Xi promoted the Chinese dream, he says, the great rejuvenation of our nation. Indeed, as the most powerful man in China, chairman of the party and a president who did away with term limits so he could rule for life, Xi has made nationalism his rallying cry. We will safeguard our sovereignty, he told the People's Congress. Any tricks to split China are doomed. Xi has built a Chinese military force unlike anything the world has seen here. His key aim is to reintegrate lost territories like Hong Kong and Taiwan, possibly by force, and to become the world's leading economic power, challenging the U.S. in every way. To lay the groundwork, Xi has consolidated power at home with a growing personal presence and a tough dictatorial rule, reining in any possible dissent from Muslim Uyghurs by jailing more than 1 million, shutting down churches, and locking up human rights activists, cracking down on opposing voices in the Communist Party. Still, there are some who challenge his vision. Zhang Lifan is a historian. China's one-party dictatorship is very difficult to sustain, says the former member of the respected Academy of Social Sciences, who's among few here not afraid to speak out. Xi is full of fantasies, Zhang says. He lives in the illusion of building a great world empire and replacing the U.S., but it's too huge and unrealistic. Not so, say the country's leaders, who point to China's rise, which has been as dramatic as Xi's own from those days in the village. And yet, the permanence of all this prosperity is not guaranteed. China's economy is slowing, its military is largely untested, and this rise to great power status is facing growing resistance internationally. Sasha Petrusic, CBC News, Beijing.